Australia spends too much time arguing about political theatre or drama or whatever controversy is trending that week, and not enough time solving the problems Australians actually care about. So that's what I want to talk about today. Welcome back to TheLMShow. So guys, according to Gemini, for Australia, these are the top 3 problems our nation is facing right now. It says that the first one is cost of living, the second one's housing affordability, and the third one is the broad economy / crime and community safety. So I guess there you have it. Australians are saying that they are the biggest issues affecting their lives. So what I want to do today is literally just go through them and suggest straightforward answers to these problems, because I am so sick and tired of hearing about just this drama. The other day, another clip from that interview that Albanese gave when he was talking about Kylie Minogue, it resurfaced and he was just talking about, you know, the most crap gift that he received. I'm just sick of that surface level drama. All right, let's just talk about these 3 problems. So let's get into that. The first one, cost of living, which it's quite a big one, and I just say a big one just because there's so many topics underneath it. So we have to talk about food, we have to talk about housing, energy, all of that rising much faster than wages. So let's just start with housing, because I think it's so straightforward. Supply and demand. We need to cut the mass immigration so that housing doesn't have as much demand and becomes more affordable. All right, it's pretty straightforward. The next one, energy. The government is still pursuing net zero. Right, so I just found this video the other day about it. I made a short form about it as well. And I think it's just a super important video just because it points out the point sort of that I'm trying to make. So let's take a look.
How much do we need to invest to get to net zero?
So I'm not sure exactly what question you're asking over what time frame.
The goal is net zero by 2050, so that's the time frame.
That's right, and between now and then there's a lot of private investment that will take place.
I'm only asking, didn't you just do a modelling exercise?
Yeah, we did. So
how much, what's the figure?
So I'm not sure whether we have a figure of the total amount of investment, but it's also, I'm not quite sure how meaningful the question is. Some of this investment is government, some of this investment will be private sector. In fact, the vast majority of it will be in the private sector.
I'm asking for both, because presumably the modelling exercise looked at the whole economy. So how much capital investment is required to get to net zero by 2050?
Dr. Heath, do we have a figure on that?
So it depends exactly how you're asking the question. So the modelling exercise, as we discussed at the last estimates, was designed to understand the path to net zero. The baseline of what would happen if we didn't have the target is not something that was part of the exercise.
So you can't tell me, despite all the modelling that was done and the spruiking the government's done of it, you can't tell me how much money Australia has to spend to get to net zero by 2050.
Oh God, I mean, what the actual fuck? But as you can see there, net zero by 2050, supposedly, allegedly, it does not have a known costing numbers attached to it. Look, I'm finding figures that say that total capital investment will be around $3 trillion and that net marginal cost will be around $300 billion. However, it's all just a bit of a mess. But then I found this video and it just comes across really well. It just clearly explains the stupidity of net zero overall. So let's take a look.
In Australia, I have to say, at the risk of being an unkind guest, you're a bit behind the times on this. Net zero is collapsing all over the place. It's gone in America. It's going in Britain. No one in Germany talks about it. No one in France ever talked about it in the first place. No one in Italy cares about it. It's on the way out because we are in greater danger than at any time since the end of the Cold War. And if there's any spare money around, we should be spending it on the defense of our countries, not on a net zero zealot's expensive dreams.
So, I mean, that's the problem with energy. All right, why are we pursuing, like the video said, this dream when reliable energy sources are available like nuclear? With that, I understand that costings are attached to it, but below that is natural gas, which Australia is a major exporter of, and it produces half the carbon emissions that coal fire produces. All right, so that's the main solution towards it. So to wrap it up, the straightforward solutions for the cost of living are housing, cut the demand, therefore create an affordability because there's more supply. energy. Stop chasing the more expensive dream of net zero and choose reliability and cost efficiency over that, which is natural gas. And overall, look, I think we need a smaller government so taxes aren't as high. So that's cost of living for me. All right. But the next one, the second top concern for Australia, which we already just sort of touched on just before because it's to do with the cost of living topic. So this will be a super quick one, but it's housing affordability. All right. We're experiencing mass migration. We're experiencing a housing shortage. And that is due to supply and demand. If you have too much demand for the supply, that is going to change the groundwork of what Australians' housing standards are going to look like. And that's another conversation, okay? But getting back to the affordability part, instead of trying to build more supply like some are advocating for, we need to cut the unnecessary demands. That would free up more supply and therefore become more affordable. So I really have nothing else to say on that because that issue is so straightforward. But moving to the third one, the broad economy / crime and community safety. Now let's just pick one area in that just because I don't want this video going for an hour. Let's just pick supply chain disruptions because that ranks the top of economic worries. Okay, so first of all, you got to address why that's such a worry. Because like we have literally just seen right before our eyes is this fuel crisis. One disruption and due to incompetency in fuel reserves and reliance on other countries, the fuel crisis wreaks havoc on us and will continue to do so. But the straightforward solution to supply chain disruptions is to become self-reliant. And I'm not saying that that'll be easy, okay, because it won't, since successive governments have ran Australia like a global factory and not a self-sufficient nation. But look, if you want fuel security, we got to start drilling. We got to start building more refineries. And people will say, well, that's going to be super expensive. And I'm going to say back, what's your price on sovereignty? And just furthering this point, let's talk about another thing here. Food. Okay, we have said this before, but I think it's a super important point. Supply chain disruptions regarding our food sector. Now, like I said in this fuel crisis, the main cause of a famine for Australia isn't lack of food. Australia literally produces enough food to feed between 60 million people and 75 million people every single year. Our population, just to reinforce that point, is around 28 million people. So to me, that doesn't really flag a huge problem there. There's probably more points under that to address, but I just want to move on to what actually would cause Australia to have a famine. And that's logistics. Because as we all know, if truck stops, Australia stops. So if we don't have enough fuel to have our trucks traveling pretty far distances because Australia is absolutely huge, then food will not hit shelves and we will be in a famine due to that. And that is due to fuel insecurity. That is due to global supply chain disruptions that can be easily fixed if we have more domestic sovereignty. And look, guys, I just want to be super clear here. All right, I'm not saying that these issues are not complex because they are. There are a lot of factors and a lot of things that would have to be passed to implement these solutions. But what I'm saying is that these solutions are not as complicated as they made out to be. All right, they're obvious. But look, just going back to that cost of living crisis that we addressed at the start, we also have to have a look at our government size. Now take a look at this table, guys. It's super interesting. It's just laying out the straightforward facts, right? Because we're a population of 28 million people. And compared to the size of our government, to me, that indicates that it is way too big. And if you have a large government for a small population, you're going to have higher taxes. All right, that's just a factual, basic economic statement. All right, big government means higher taxes. Why? Because there's more people to fund. Right, so if you have more people to fund, you're taxing the people more to do so. Therefore, cost of living goes up. So, I mean, there you have it, guys. Those are the top 3 problems that Australians are saying that we're faced with. I agree with that they are huge problems for us here in Australia. Cost of living crisis, so fucking expensive to go to the simple grocery store. The second one was housing affordability, especially for young people. That's a huge one, but for everyone, that's a huge one. And the third one is the broad economy / crime and community safety. Like I said at the start, if you want me to have a really big in-depth dive into that, I'm super keen to do so. Just let me know, because if I'm doing an hour episode, I definitely want it to be wanted sort of thing. But that was the first time I addressed cost of living, which I also think is a super important topic. So let me know if you want me to go more in depth with that, because we also need to get into all the other factors that have to do with the cost of living and why it's so expensive at the moment. But look, I said in my last video that all of these problems will become a lot more obvious if we address the main core problem. And I think the main core problem is that Australia hasn't really defined who we are. All right, you can say that we've had we have the Constitution and we have Australian values, but the most important one is how the government views citizens. And in my opinion, I don't think we've really defined that. So I think that we got to fix that main problem first, and then the solutions will become so much more obvious to everything that we're facing right now. But that's the end of this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope to see you all in my next one. And make sure to check out our Kanga merch. The link should be in the bio. And I'll see you all in my next one. Thanks, guys.